I'm 41 and thought I had a pretty boring life, if I'm being honest. Married for almost 20 years, 2 teenage kids, stable job, suburban house. I always told myself I liked it that way. Predictable, safe. I wasn't someone who chased drama. But everything changed the day a plain white envelope showed up on our doorstep. It was a Saturday morning. My husband, Greg, had taken our daughter to soccer practice, and I was home alone doing laundry. Nothing unusual. That's why I didn't think much of it when I saw the envelope on the welcome mat. No return address, no stamp, just our last name in block letters. Wells family. I assumed it was one of those weird neighborhood flyers, or some passive-aggressive HOA nonsense, so I opened it without thinking. What I found inside made my hands go numb. There were 5 photographs. The first one was of Greg, my husband, hugging a woman from behind. Not some casual side hug either. His arms were wrapped tightly around her waist, and her head was tilted back against his chest like they did this all the time. The second photo showed them kissing. Not a peck, a full-on kiss. The third? Them entering a hotel together. You could see the name of the place in the background. I recognized it. It was just across town, one of those extended stay places near the airport. The fourth was inside a restaurant I'd never been to. They were holding hands across the table. He was smiling. She looked maybe 10 years younger than me. The fifth photo was the worst. It was the woman, alone this time, but she was sitting in our living room. That stopped me cold. I stared at it for a full minute, trying to process. The angle was weird, slightly tilted, like someone had snapped it quickly, maybe from behind the hallway door. She was on our couch. The red throw blanket was bunched beside her, the one only we had. There was no mistaking it. She'd been in our home. My legs buckled and I had to sit down. My heart was racing so fast I felt dizzy. I looked at the photos again, trying to figure out when they could have been taken. Greg had said he'd been working late a few nights the week before, something about Q3 audits and finalizing reports. I never questioned it. He'd never given me a reason to, until now. But the more I looked at the photos, the more something felt off. The timestamps were cropped out. The angles were strange. There was no context, no indication of whether these were recent or even real. Photoshop crossed my mind for half a second, but the final image, the woman on our couch, was too specific to ignore. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to call Greg right then and there and scream at him. I wanted to throw the photos in the fireplace and pretend I never saw them. But instead, I did something I never thought I would. I put the pictures back in the envelope and hid it behind the stack of towels in the guest bathroom. And then I waited. For what? I didn't know. But I had the sickest feeling in my stomach, like this was just the beginning of something I wasn't ready for. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid in bed next to Greg, staring at the ceiling, every part of me on fire, with questions I couldn't ask. He snored lightly beside me like nothing was wrong, like there wasn't a woman, some stranger, who had been inside our house while I was out, or maybe while I was asleep. That was the part that made my skin crawl, the violation of, not just by him, but by her. I tried to remember if anything had seemed off, anything missing, anything out of place, and suddenly I remembered something. 3 weeks ago, I'd come home from work early. I walked into the house and swore I heard someone moving upstairs. I'd called out. Greg had said it was just him putting away laundry. I didn't think twice. But now it didn't feel innocent. The next day, I decided to do something I never thought I'd do I installed a motion-activated camera in the hallway facing our living room. I told myself it was for peace of mind, nothing more. But the truth? I wanted to catch something. I needed to, because if those photos were real, then Greg had betrayed me in our own home, and if they weren't real, then someone was trying to destroy us. Either way, I wasn't safe. Greg was sweet that Sunday morning. Too sweet. Made me coffee, brought me breakfast in bed. He kissed my forehead and told me how much he loved me. Said he was proud of everything we'd built together. His words didn't comfort me. They terrified me. Because if he could say all that and still be lying, then who was I really married to? I asked him, casually, if anything weird had happened at the house lately. He just looked at me with that same familiar face, the one I'd trusted for 20 years, and said everything was normal, nothing unusual. That was the moment I knew. He was lying, because someone had been in this house, and he knew it. But it got worse. Monday morning after he left for work, I checked the footage from the hallway camera. There was nothing from that day. But as I was going through the older files, stored on the cloud from our old baby monitor system I'd forgotten we even had, I noticed something strange. A random spike in motion alerts from 11 days ago, between 1 and 3 p.m. Greg was supposed to be at work. I was definitely at work. The kids were at school. But someone had been walking through the house, slowly, pausing every few feet. I played the clip. At first, the angle didn't show much, just the shadows moving. But then, clear as day, a woman appeared on screen. Long black hair, black coat, carrying a large purse. She walked directly to the living room, sat down on the couch, looked around for a moment, and smiled like she belonged there. I paused the video and stared at her face. I'd never seen her before in my life. She looked like she'd been here. She looked like she planned to come back. I couldn't stop staring at the screen. That frozen frame, the woman calm and comfortable in my living room, was burned into my brain. She didn't look nervous. She wasn't snooping. She sat down like she knew this place. Her posture wasn't tense. Her eyes scanned the room like she was remembering it, like she had memories here. But how? Who was she? And then it hit me. The photo of her on our couch, the one from the envelope, was taken from the same angle as the camera footage. Same time of day. Same throw pillow half falling off the couch. Only one person would know exactly where our old baby monitor camera had been hidden. The one Greg installed years ago, buried behind the bookshelf, just in case. Back when the kids were little and used to sneak downstairs for cartoons at 3 a.m. Greg, he told me years ago that it had stopped working, but clearly it hadn't. Or maybe he just never turned it off. I kept replaying the short clip, looking for clues, anything I could use. But that was the only clear shot I got of her face. I was shaking, so I did what I probably shouldn't have done. I went looking through our family computer. It felt gross, like snooping through your partner's journal. But at that point, I didn't care. Something wasn't right, and Greg wasn't going to tell me the truth. His laptop was locked, but the shared desktop wasn't. I opened our family photo library, the one we backed up everything to. Birthdays, vacations, random selfies, thousands of pictures. I didn't even know what I was looking at until I saw her. At first, it didn't register. She was in the background, a birthday party last year. Our son's 13th. She was blurry, almost hidden behind the group, but it was her. Same black hair, same smile. 3 photos later, she was standing behind Greg. He wasn't touching her. He wasn't even looking at her, but they were too close. Way too close for someone I supposedly didn't know, and definitely too close for someone Greg had never mentioned. I clicked faster. Another photo. Our daughter's school play. There she was again, 2 rows behind us, staring straight at the camera. She had been at our events, our celebrations, in our life, and I never noticed her until now. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This woman hadn't just been in my house. She'd been watching us for a long time, and I had no idea why. I couldn't breathe. My hands hovered over the keyboard, as if the answers might rise up on their own. How long had she been there? At our parties, in our house, in the background of our lives, watching us while we smiled and laughed, completely oblivious. I opened the file info on each picture, checking dates, timestamps, GPS data, anything. The earliest one she appeared in was 3 years ago, at my daughter's 10th birthday party. 3 years ago. And I had never seen her before last week, but she had been tracking us. That was the only explanation. I opened our home security app and checked the guest access log. Nothing. Greg and I both had main user codes, but the app showed that a third code had been created at some point. It was labeled maintenance, but it had been used twice in the last 2 months. I hadn't authorized any new codes. Greg never mentioned them. That third access code? It was used 11 days ago, the same day she showed up on the hallway footage. I took a screenshot, heart pounding. I was done pretending this was anything close to normal. When Greg got home from work that night, I was ready. I didn't confront him directly. Instead, I watched him, closely. I asked how his day was, what he'd eaten for lunch, if his boss was still writing him about Q3 deadlines. He answered every question like nothing was wrong. Calm, casual. Then I asked if we still had that old storage bin of party decorations in the garage, the one we used every year for the kids. He froze, just for a second, but I saw it. Then he nodded, said he thought it was buried under the camping. I smiled and said I'd go look for it myself. When I got to the garage, I didn't head for the decorations. I went to the tall filing cabinet Greg insisted we keep, the one with old tax forms, appliance manuals, all the crap we never needed but couldn't throw away. I remembered once, years ago, he told me not to open the bottom drawer because it was just old work junk. I opened it anyway. It was full of papers, mostly boring stuff, but near the back, behind a stack of outdated bank statements, was a sealed manila folder with a single name written across the top in black Sharpie. Natalie. I felt like the world tilted. That name. It wasn't familiar. Not a coworker. Not a cousin. I racked my brain trying to remember if he'd ever said it in passing. He hadn't. I opened the folder. Inside were more photos. Not just of her, but of her and Greg, together. Smiling, holding hands. Her sitting in his lap at what looked like a lake house. Her wearing one of his old sweatshirts I'd long since assumed he donated. In one picture, she was sitting on our porch swing, alone, drinking from a mug that said, "World's Best Dad." The mug our son had made Greg for Father's Day 2 years ago. I couldn't look away, and that's when I saw the note. Just a single torn sheet of paper at the back of the folder, written in Greg's hand. "I never stopped loving you. Just be patient. I'm getting everything." My heart stopped. This wasn't just some this was a plan. I sat on the cold garage floor, the folder open in front of me, everything in my body buzzing with rage and disbelief. That note, his note, wasn't just some emotional outburst scribbled in of guilt. It was a promise. I'm getting everything. Getting what ready? To leave us? To move her in? I suddenly felt sick. All this time, I thought I was the wife, the real one, the only one. But what if I wasn't? What if Natalie wasn't just the other woman? What if I was? I stared at the photos longer. That lake house. I'd never seen it before. But I could make out the name of a realty company on the wooden sign behind them. Long Pines Properties. I snapped a picture of the image with my phone and looked it up right then and there, right in the middle of my garage with shaking hands and my heart doing backflips in my chest. The lake house was real, and it was owned, according to public record, by Gregory Wells. But not my Greg, not at our address. It listed his name alongside a different mailing address, one I didn't recognize, one in a town 45 minutes away. I ran back inside and locked myself in the bathroom. My fingers could barely type fast enough as I searched the address. It was a small, white, single-story house with blue shutters. On Google Street View, there were flower pots out front and a faded bike leaning against the porch. A family home, and then I saw her. In one of the older photos dated just last year, Natalie, standing in the doorway, waving at someone out of frame. I zoomed in. 2 kids, maybe 6 or 7, ran past her on the front lawn. I thought I was going to pass out. Greg didn't just have an affair. He had another life, a whole other family, and he'd kept it hidden for years. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and tried to breathe. Everything around me started to twist. Every business trip, every late meeting, every weekend where he'd volunteered to take the kids camping, just the 2 of them, because I needed a break. He wasn't being generous. He was splitting his time. And Natalie knew. Of course she knew. She had been in my house. She had let herself in, sat on my couch, worn Greg's sweatshirt, the one I'd been looking for months, and smiled like none of it was wrong. Because to her, it wasn't. To her, I was the other woman, and I didn't even know I was in a war. I called her. I didn't sleep that. I couldn't. I just laid there, wide awake, while Greg snored beside me, peaceful, oblivious, wrapped in our comforter like a man with nothing to hide. I kept glancing over at him, wondering how many lies a person had to tell before they just stopped feeling anything at all. And I knew then I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. Because Greg was a liar, a smooth one, and if I went to him now, he'd spin another story, another excuse. He'd lie right to my face with that same calm voice he used when reading bedtime stories to our kids. He'd gaslight me, twist the narrative, make me question what I knew was true. So I didn't call him. I called her. It took me all morning to work up the nerve, but eventually I found Natalie's phone number. It was listed on an old rental application I found through a background search. She'd applied to rent a property years ago, and it had her contact in. The number still worked. It rang 3 times. Then she answered. Her voice was higher than I expected. Soft, almost sweet. I didn't say anything at first. I just listened to the silence between us, heavy with everything I now knew. She spoke again, asked who was calling, and I told her. I told her my name. I told her I was Greg's wife, his other wife apparently, the one with the mortgage and the teenagers, and the 20 years of marriage he never bothered to mention. There was a pause. I could almost hear her breath catch. She didn't hang up. She didn't deny it. She just said, "I was wondering when you'd find out." That made my blood run cold. No shock, no confusion, no shame, just acceptance. She said they'd been together for nearly 6 years. 6 years. She said Greg had told her he was in a bad marriage and that he couldn't leave right away because of the kids. She said she was being patient, just like he asked her to. She had no idea I existed until 2 years into their relationship when she found my name on a prescription bill in his car. But by then, she was already pregnant. Pregnant. So now the kids in those pictures weren't just hers. They were his. My kids had half-siblings. I was shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I asked her, quietly, trying to keep my voice from cracking, how many times she'd been in my house. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Twice. The first time he brought me. Said you were out of town with the kids. He wanted me to see where he lived. The second time? She let herself in while we were sleeping. I felt like I was going to be sick. I asked her why. Why sneak in? Why sit on my couch? And she said something I'll never forget. I just wanted to see what it felt like, to sit in the life that should have been mine. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about betrayal. This was about replacement. Natalie didn't want to ruin my life. She wanted to take it. After I hung up, I sat on the bathroom floor for nearly an hour, just staring at the wall. 6 years, 2 children, 2 houses, 2 lives, and now, 1 insane, shared reality. I should have called a lawyer. I should have packed a bag. I should have done something, but instead I opened Greg's filing cabinet again, because there was one word Natalie had said that repeating in my like a drumbeat. Patient. She said she was patient for what? I dug deeper, past old tax returns, work receipts, insurance brochures, until this one wasn't hidden with Natalie's name. It was wedged between car documents, almost like it had been tossed there in a hurry. Inside were two things: a life insurance policy, a handwritten checklist titled Things to Find. I read the insurance policy first. It had my name on it, but the beneficiary wasn't me. It wasn't Greg either. It was Natalie. I blinked, looked again. Maybe I was misreading it. There it was in black and white. The policy had been updated just 2 months ago. The date was circled in blue pen, right after my birthday. Right after Greg had taken me out for that romantic weekend at the cabin. The one where he kept staring at me like he had something big on his mind. I thought he was planning a surprise trip. I thought maybe he was getting sentimental with age. But now I knew what he was thinking. He wasn't falling in love again. He was tying up loose ends. I grabbed the handwritten checklist and scanned it. Half the items were normal. Update home title. Rework will. Move second car to storage. Then, near the bottom, speak to N about timeline. Keep dosage low at first. Monitor reaction. Confirm no interactions. W's existing meds. That last one made my skin crawl. Dosage. Reactions. Suddenly, everything made sense. The headaches. The nausea. The dizziness I'd been having for weeks. I'd blamed stress, hormones, age, anything but him. But now I couldn't be sure of anything. Greg wasn't just cheating. He wasn't just lying. He was planning something. Something that could make Natalie a very wealthy widow. And me? A ghost. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and stared at myself like I didn't recognize the woman in the reflection. She looked normal. Tired, maybe. A little pale, but alive. Real. That was the scariest part. How normal everything still looked. Even as my entire reality fractured underneath it. There was a life insurance policy with my name on, a beneficiary that wasn't me, and a man sleeping in my bed who was very clearly preparing for my absence. I didn't know if Greg was trying to poison me slowly, or just lay the groundwork for some accident, but one thing was now terrifyingly clear. He wasn't planning for us to grow old together, so I did the only thing I could. I started pretending. That night, I cooked dinner like usual. I asked about his day, smiled when he made bad jokes, let him rub my shoulders on the couch while we watched him. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I waited until he was out cold. Then I snuck into the kitchen and pulled every bottle, every supplement, every prescription from the cabinet. I laid them out on the floor and took pictures, compared labels, looked up interactions, side effects. One bottle stood out immediately. It was a small, unlabeled amber container. No pharmacy logo, no doctor's, just a white sticker with my name in Greg's handwriting. I opened it. The pills were pale blue, round, no imprint code, which meant they weren't from any licensed manufacturer, not legally. I took one, sealed it in a plastic bag, and hid it inside the lining of my purse. I'd take it to a lab the next day, quietly, carefully, because if Greg was slipping me something, and God help me, I was almost certain now that he was, I needed proof. In the meantime, kept the act going. The next morning, I told him I had errands to run, kissed him on the cheek, smiled. He told me to take it easy, asked if I'd been feeling better. Better? I told him yes, much better. That was the first lie I told with absolute confidence. I dropped the pill off at a private testing lab in the city, paid cash, used a fake name. They told me it would take 72 hours, 3 days. That's all. And in those 3 days, I barely slept. I went through the motions of being a wife, a mother, a woman who wasn't unraveling from the inside out. But on the second night, something happened that made it all so much worse. I was in the laundry room, folding clothes, when I noticed the small glass window on the side door was smudged. It looked like a fingerprint. I wiped it with a towel and froze. There was a second fingerprint, lower, like someone had pressed their face against the glass. I ran outside, heart pounding, but no one was there. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, not just by Greg anymore, by someone. The next morning, I checked our doorbell. Greg had deleted the last 24 hours, but that wasn't surprising. He had access to everything. He'd set the system up himself. But then I remembered something. The old trail camera he kept in the attic. He used to take it on hikes to track deer, but last year he tested it in the backyard and forgot to take it down. It was still strapped to the tree behind the shed. I grabbed it, plugged the memory card into my laptop, and scrolled through the still images. Most were just wind-blown leaves and shadows, until I got to the frame from 2:47 a.m. the night before. There was someone standing in our backyard. It was Natalie, but she wasn't looking at the house. She was looking directly at the camera, smiling. I almost threw up. She knew I'd find the footage. She wanted me to. This wasn't just about Greg anymore. She was playing a game, and I had no idea what the rules were, or how long I'd been unknowingly participating. I saved the image and texted it to a burner email I'd created the day before. Then I went upstairs and watched Greg getting dressed for work. He looked so normal. He adjusted his tie, kissed me on the forehead, told me he because of another lie, but I smiled, because I wasn't ready to not yet, but someone else knew. Someone who wanted me to see her. Someone who had been inside my house, and now she wanted back in. The lab called just before. They confirmed what I already knew deep down. The pills Greg had been giving me weren't supplements. They weren't over-the-counter. They were a mix of sedatives and a slow-acting blood pressure depressant, enough to leave someone foggy, exhausted, maybe even too clumsy to survive. One pharmacist I consulted off record told me Someone wanted to make you easier to cry. I didn't scream. I felt nothing. Because by then, I was done mourning the man I thought I married. That night, Greg came home early. Said his dinner was canceled. No explanation. He poured me a glass of wine like always, even though I never asked for it. I pretended to sip while we made small talk. Asked him if we could go through old photo albums together later. Something about missing the early days. He seemed flattered. Flattered. God, the ego of a man planning your funeral and still expecting you to stroke his. I excused myself to the bathroom, but I didn't go there. I went into our daughter's room, where I had quietly installed a second camera, one Greg didn't know about. I clicked record on my phone and placed it just behind the curtains, aimed at the living room. Then I waited. At exactly 8:17 p.m., the doorbell rang. He looked confused, but not surprised. And when he opened the door, Natalie walked in. No hesitation, no attempt to hide. She was wearing a silk blouse and perfume I could smell from upstairs. She walked straight to the couch, sat down, and patted the space beside her like she'd done it 100 times. And Greg? He sat, right next to her, like it was their house, their home. I recorded every second, the flirting, the way he touched her knee, the quiet little laugh she let out when he said, "She's been so tired lately." It's working. Those words hit me like a bullet. It's working. But I didn't move. Not yet, because I needed one more thing. Natalie leaned in and whispered something. Greg reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pill bottle, the same, and placed it on the... She smiled. That was the moment I stepped out. The look on his face when he saw me was almost funny. Eyes wide, mouth open. He couldn't decide whether to lie, or run, or throw up. He just sat there, still, cold, as if this had been the plan all along. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I simply held up my phone and showed him the video playing in real time from the camera. Showed him the footage that was already backed up to 5 different cloud accounts. And then I told him the pills were already tested, that the lab results were filed away, that copies were with my lawyer, and a second copy had been overnighted to his office, his boss's office. He stood up, stumbled forward like he could explain his way out of murder, but I was already dialing. Not the police. Child Protective Services. Because Greg wasn't just my husband, he was a father. And he had 2 children with another woman who clearly knew about this plan, who had snuck into my home and stared into the cameras like it was all a game. Natalie finally spoke. She told Greg he was an idiot, said it wasn't supposed to happen like this, that she told him to wait, and then she walked out, just like that. No guilt, no fight, like the monster she really was. Aftermath: Greg was arrested 2 days later, tampering with medication, attempted poisoning, fraud. The investigation is ongoing, and the charges keep stacking up. As for Natalie, she's disappeared. They haven't found her yet, but I have no doubt she'll slip up. People like her always do, especially when they think they've gotten away with it. My kids are safe. They never knew how close they were to losing me. I made sure of that. The house? I sold it. Every room was soaked in betrayal. I moved to a quiet town 2 states away, changed my name, started over. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, expecting to see a white envelope on the doorstep, but there's nothing there, just clean air and peace. I'm not the same person I was. I never will be, but I'm alive, and for a while, that's all I ever wanted.